World building has never been exciting for me. For many players, unlike myself, that is the whole appeal of ttrpgs. They get to create their own worlds to tell stories in, come up with an array of characters, different species, different magic systems, how the weather works, all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, I'd rather stick a fork in my eye. At least, that's what I used to think. The problem is, I grew up with all these kinds of story worlds, Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and a certain set of rules for how creatures work and how magic works and what you should do, shouldn't do, different types of gods, all that kind of stuff. I've just found that I can't get interested in new fantasy environments because they just feel like home-brand versions of the ones I grew up on. And as a result, I've just not been interested in fantasy literature and fantasy media at all, really. And it means that when I try to create a world of my own, it feels like a remix of an original rather than something fresh and new. And because of this, I've actually preferred to run pre-built adventures, which I know I'm learning a whole new world as well, but I just find that if it's pre-written, it's something that I can just learn, ingest, try to recreate, staying as true to the notes as possible, and I don't have to worry about ironing out all the little kinks and creases like what's the history of this mountain or what was the last 3 world wars that took place in this environment. It created this really strong mindset that if I study the outline, I will have a good time. Although, this did change when I started running a longer campaign that wasn't entirely planned out from the start. This happened to be a campaign of Slugblasters. I'll save my whole review of Slugblasters for another video. There is a fantastic Quinn's Quest one if you're interested, which is the whole reason why I got into it to begin with. But I just found that Slugblasters is the perfect training wheels for a GM that is not interested in fleshing out the whole universe on their own. And for the purpose of this video, you can totally strip off the label of Slugblasters and think about any kind of other game or book that you can apply this to. I just loved how the world building of this particular book felt like it was a bunch of ideas you were familiar with, cyberpunk or jungles or mechs and all that kind of stuff, meshed together to create one world. And it felt like it was building off pre-existing ideas rather than trying to learn everything new from scratch just for the sake of reinventing the wheel. Even the NPCs had the most fantastic descriptions that were no longer than a sentence, but they had enough key words that felt really evocative and that I could take the NPCs in whichever direction I found most exciting. And it just became this perfect mix of guidance and inspiration. And it meant for me as a GM that I never went entirely off the rails of the world that Slugblasters was trying to create, but it did give me enough free rein that I could take the source material into a direction that I was really interested in and might not have been the original goal of the author. And that's when it finally hit me. World building is both micro and macro. The idea of worlding up until this point, to me, sounded a lot like all the history that you read about for Lord of the Rings, or explaining this entire character's family lineage and what did their third uncle do at this Second World War and blah blah blah. But the thing is, 2 NPCs from different factions interacting and having a certain type of relationship in front of the players is a form of world building, just on a really small scale. And all of a sudden, this was a type of world building that felt really accessible to me and really exciting. And the impact is creating this tangible, living, breathing environment that your players can get really invested in and feel like they can have a visible impact on through the actions of their characters. And it ends up creating this really exciting effect that you might not be able to get from a pre-built adventure. If you're trying to do something a bit more railroady, which whilst I know cops a lot of flack, but I did really see the appeal of as a GM in my earlier days, you find that you can't create these really exciting serendipitous moments because your hands are so tightly gripping the steering wheel of this campaign. There was a particular really wonderful instance of this in our Slugblasters campaign in a particular environment that is essentially a combo of like Moroccan spice markets and aliens and ghosts and all that wonderful good stuff. And because the world building had been fleshed out enough through a couple of key characters having notable conflicts and their relationships with other factions being really clear, one of the characters, simply off their own accord, ended up striking up a really cool relationship with one of the other NPCs, which ended up having such a lasting effect for the campaign, influencing finale stuff. So at the end of the day, no disrespect to anyone still playing those pre-built adventures. I get it, I love it, it's easy, it's nice and sweet. But don't be afraid of trying to step a little bit out of your comfort zone and take on a book like Slugblasters that has the world painted out for you in a way where there's enough detail, you can get invested, but also add your own spin on things. And who knows, you now might be like me, who has a sudden craving to start developing a story world of my own for a future campaign. Words I never thought would come out of my mouth. But anyway, that's all I had to say. Thanks for joining me while I yap about world building and the little character arc that I've had with it over the last couple months. If you're interested in hearing about other little revelations, epiphanies, or theories that I'm testing in my own campaign, consider subscribing. Otherwise, thanks again, and I hope to see you again soon.